Good morning. Let's talk real quick about some surface treatments. This first one here is called cutouts. So on the sample of fresh clay, you can see it's very easy, very like the name. This is where you are cutting out shapes and creating gaps of negative space. A finished product and how this effect might look can be seen here in the lattice work of this project. So once again, this is cutouts. Moving on, we have carving, specifically low relief carving. What makes it low relief is that there's not a whole lot of depth. You're not seeing behind whatever it is you've carved. You're just creating the illusion that depth exists. This is very similar to what we did with our stamps. Here you see a work in progress. We've got a bit of a pier with a building behind it. And this is how the finished effect looks. So once again, this is carving, specifically low relief carving. Our next surface treatment is called impressing. This is where you're using a stamp of some sort and pressing it into the clay to create an effect. Here we have a couple of rolled stamps, but you could easily create the effect with a stationary stamp by just repeating the stamp as you go down the surface. You can see this effect in the scales or shingles on the roof of this birdhouse. So again, this technique, this surface treatment is called impressing. Our next surface layer, or surface treatment, is called layering. This is what we've kind of done by default. Anytime you've taken clay and added it in some form of shape or design onto a piece of clay that you're already working with, you are layering the clay. This is layering. Here's an example of how it might look on a finished product. There's a little bit of carving that's happened in this as well, but you can also see the layers that have been built up on top. So again, this surface treatment is called layering. The next surface treatment that we have is called etching. It's very similar to carving, however, where we were using carving to create the illusion of depth, etching is going to focus mainly on lines and outlines of shapes and creating patterns rather than creating the illusion of a scene. So once again, this is etching. Very similar to etching, we have a technique that's called sgraffito. Again, it's going to focus on patterns and outlines and lines. The difference between sgraffito and etching is that sgraffito makes use of a contrast in colors. You can create this contrast by putting a coat of glaze on your clay surface. Make sure you're using the right glaze for this process. Or you can also coat with a layer of slip that's a different clay body from what you're using. The main thing with sgraffito is you want to make sure that you have a color contrast between the top layer and the layer that your lines reveal underneath. Once again, this is called sgraffito.